The preceding program was brought to you in part by Welcome to this week's edition of the Pete Mezzetti Show. I'm Pete Mezzetti. My guest this evening is Amore, who is a local book author who co-authored a book with Jim Calhoun.
Yes.
Welcome, sir.
Thank you for having me.
How are you?
Great to be here.
Thanks for coming down.
Yeah, as we talked about, these are kind of my roots here in this part
absolutely.
of the state. So always glad to be back here.
Well, tell us a little bit about your roots on this part of the state.
Well, I actually began my career at the Shoreline newspapers. They had their office in the old schoolhouse in Guilford, if you remember.
Yeah, I do.
And Shoreline, the Shoreline Times and the Clinton Recorder and the old Saybrook Pictorial. And
Yes.
all papers that I used to write for. And I know my first assignment for them, big assignment for them, was I went to Yankee Stadium to interview Brian Dayette from Deep River.
Really?
When he was up with the Yankees briefly in 1984. And I remember I was with a couple of guys from here, and I told Dave Winfield I wanted to speak to him about Dayette because I was from his hometown. And Dave Winfield said, he goes, "You're from Deep River?" And I said, "Well, yeah." And he goes, "These guys here from Deep River?" I said, "Yeah." He goes, "Well, who's left in Deep River? Can't be anybody left in Deep River running the stores."
Yeah, right?
So that was my first experience in Yankee Stadium, is representing the old Saybrook Pictorial.
Wow. And then where did your career take you?
Yeah, I went to the New Haven Register for a bit.
Okay.
Then I went to the Milford Citizen, which was a daily paper at that time.
Yeah.
And I was a sports editor on a staff of one.
Okay. So you were it?
That was it. And then I moved to the Current in 1989. I did high schools for a little bit. Then I did the Giants from 92 to 99. I did the Yankees from 99 to 07. Then I did UConn men's basketball until 2021, and then I became the general columnist in 2021, which is where you find me now. And I have a little more flexibility, which is how I was able to write a book.
Oh, there you go. And so obviously you cover all UConn sports.
All Connecticut sports.
All Connecticut sports.
Obviously, UConn is predominant among that tableau, but I try to be all over the state when I can.
And now how's the high school football season looking? It's getting ready to wind down here in a couple of days.
Yeah, well, we're in the quarterfinals, and a lot of times you have a lot of mismatches in these quarterfinals because you have tech schools maybe playing schools that they really shouldn't be playing. I think they need to tweak that a little bit. But then you get to when you start to get to the semifinals and then the finals, I think we're going to have some great games and some great matchups. And I always enjoy that because you have teams from all corners of the state playing, and you don't really know what a team is about until you see them.
Right.
And I'm anxious to see like Killingly, which has been so good.
Yeah.
Anxious to see how they match up against maybe one of the teams that they play from different parts of the state.
Exactly. And now down here on the Shoreline, there's a co-op. So Old Saybrook, Clinton, and Westbrook merged together.
Yeah. Well, that's, I know when I was covering high schools for back in the day, Morgan had a team.
Yes.
But kids at Westbrook and Old Saybrook, they really didn't, right? They just had to play soccer.
Yeah, right.
So the co-ops are really good to, give people from different towns an opportunity to play that maybe wouldn't have had it before.
Now, as far as on the college level, how's UConn looking this year? What do you think?
Well, it's hard not to like what you've seen from the men.
Yes.
They've looked awfully good. They did have a loss to Arizona, but they had a couple of important players out that night. But they're about both teams, men and women, are about as deep as they've been. And I think, the men are going to be right there all the way to the end. I don't think anyone's going to win the championship without going through the men.
Right.
And I'll tell you, the women, I'd be surprised if they lost the game this year. They pretty much have it all. They're kind of almost an embarrassment of riches, as we saw the other day when they won 104-39 in a conference game.
Yes.
So sometimes I think Chino could split his squad in two, and the reserves would be a top 25 team. So they've got everything going for them right now. If they stay healthy and things break a little bit their way, I think they're going to have one of the best teams he's had.
Yeah. Now, how about on the football side of things?
Well, we've got to find a football coach.
I know.
That's the big
What
one.
happened?
And well, Jim, very predictably, I think, wanted to go back to the Rocky Mountain area, which is where he was living when UConn got him. He likes that part of the country. His family's there. His ties are there. I think he likes the energy around football there. I think he was always a little bit uncomfortable with the heavy focus on basketball here in New England, but particularly UConn. So I think it was inevitable that he was going to go. And what he did at UConn, the way he turned that program around from the absolute bottom of the barrel to a very, very competitive program with a bright future, he earned the right to write his own ticket. So, it was pretty inevitable he was going to leave, but UConn now, it's incumbent upon them. They've got to get this hire right to keep the momentum that he's built.
Right. Now, how long do you think that's going to take?
Well, I think it could happen. It could happen any day, but I think it's more likely that they want to really give the interim coach, Gordon Samus, who is kind of the mastermind of the UConn offense, give him a chance to see, can he keep the squad together and get them ready for a bowl game in a few weeks.
Right.
And then maybe, I think it's, what they say, Peter, possession is 9/10 of the law, right?
Yes.
So it's his job right now and to do what he can with it. And it wouldn't surprise me if they stayed with him, because I think he'd be a heck of a candidate, frankly. I think that would be a good move for them to keep the continuity, rather than go out and bring in another guy from the outside who would then kind of blow everything up and you'd have to start all over again.
Right. Now, what bowl do you think they're going to?
Well, it's impossible to predict it because bowls have the ability to negotiate out of their league conference tie-ins. Last year the Fenway Bowl did that, and UConn brought 27,000 fans there. So I would not be surprised if that happened again, if they ended up in the Fenway again. I wouldn't be surprised if the Yankees took note of that crowd at Fenway last year and tried to get them in their bowl.
Right.
And I also hear a lot of talk about Florida, the Gasparilla Bowl in Tampa, which would be a nice bowl, and perhaps against Florida State. That would be a good game for UConn to play in, and there are a lot of alumni, a lot of people in Florida interested in UConn. So I would say New York, Boston, or Florida would be certainly the places that UConn wants to go.
Absolutely. Now, what's the interim coach like?
Reminds me a little of Parcells. He's a Jersey guy, and he's a big guy, and he's very gregarious, and he's offensive line oriented. But I was very impressed with him from the first minute that Mora assembled his staff, and he was the offensive line coach. And the first game they played, the first series of the first game they played out at Utah State in 2022, you could see that it was a completely different group, and that his offensive line set the tone for that. They were well organized and well coached and played well together. So he's a great offensive line coach. And then when he became the offensive coordinator, he's really grown into that. And he's done he took a quarterback that was an FCS quarterback, and he's made him into a guy that is on the Heisman ballot, Joe Fagnano. So I'd like to see UConn lean into that reputation and become known as a quarterback developing program. because then I think they could get the next quarterback and the next quarterback and the next quarterback
Right.
if they have that reputation. So I think if you would UConn would be very wise to, again, keep that continuity.
Now, professionally speaking on my side, I prefer college sports over pro sports. College basketball is
Right.
one, like this time of the year
Right.
is football and basketball,
It
my
is.
favorite.
It is. But as you know, Peter, it's getting harder and harder to tell the difference between professional sports and college sports.
It is. It is. And now, as far as, how did you guys get the idea for the book?
Well, Jim had written 2 books previously.
Okay.
He wrote his memoirs after the first championship in 1999, wrote a book on leadership in 2004. And after 20 years, he kind of wanted to write another book.
Okay.
And someone gave him, he's an avid reader of everything,
Okay.
and someone gave him a baseball book called The Wax Pack, where the author took a random pack of 1980s baseball cards,
Right.
opened it up, and had the 15 players, 15 names.
Yeah.
And he went around the country tracking each of them down to write about where they are now and what they're doing and how their lives and careers turned out after baseball.
Really?
So he thought it was a great idea, and he wanted to maybe turn this idea on its side a little bit, or inside out a little bit, and pick 15 or 16 players that he coached or knew, or people that he crossed his path and affected his life, or he tried to affect their life, and write their stories.
Right.
Obviously, we talked to all of them, and as well as to Jim. And so we picked out 15 players that Jim felt he had impact on, and we examined Jim's relationship with each of those players and how it developed. So it was kind of on that wax pack structure, but Jim then kind of, we just kind of modeled after what Jim wanted to do. But that was all Jim's idea.
Okay.
And I really thought it was a terrific idea, and I told him that, if you want to do a third book, do it for the right reasons. Do it because there's a story you want to tell that you haven't told yet.
Yeah.
And he felt that this was the story that he wanted to tell about his relationships and how he connected with people. And so that's what this book is about. It's not a memoir, although we obviously get into some of his background. It's not a basketball, hey, we did this year, and we did this in this game, and we did that in that game. It's not a lot of jump shots and free throws and rebounds. It's a people book, because Jim, I think, what his whole career was not about coaching basketball, it's about coaching people.
Right.
And I think he could probably, he's one of those guys I always say can go and coach any sport. He could go read a book about field hockey cover to cover, and then go out and coach it and make a team better, because he coaches people, not games.
Right. Now, what do you think you wanted to accomplish with the book?
Well, Jim, the seminal moment of his life was when his father died suddenly of a heart attack when Jim was 15. And he's told that story many times, sad story. He was playing in an American Legion game up in Braintree, Mass., and some kid called over the fence, "Hey, Calhoun, you better get home, your dad just died." So he had to become, at a young age, the man of the family. His mother, he had 5 sisters and a younger brother, and he kind of had to become the man of the family. And he had to give up his dreams of playing basketball for a while and work various jobs around Braintree, Mass. To support the family. And his coaches, his high school coaches in particular, stayed in touch with him, stayed on him, to get out of there and to go to college and to find a way to get things together and go play in college, which he eventually did at AIC. But he felt that he would have fallen by the wayside if it weren't for the coaches that came into his life when he was 18 or 19 and 20.
Right.
And he really has spent the last 60 years paying that forward to try to do for other young people what his coaches did for him. And that, I think, is what he wanted to get across with each of these chapters and each of these people, is how he at least tried, and more often than not, very more often than not, succeeded in paying forward what had been done for him when he was the age of these people in this book.
Now, how was it working with Jim to write the book?
Well, it's quite an experience.
Is it?
Because Jim is, he's still very much an incredibly passionate guy, a very can-do guy. He was very concerned about every aspect of the book and the writing, very concerned about the publishing. He's very concerned about the promotion and the sales of the book. If he's going to get involved in anything, he wants it to be at a high level of success.
Right.
So for he and I started working together. He was incredibly engaged in this project. A lot of famous people do books. It's almost like the co-writer has to really write the whole thing and really push them to do it. But Jim was just totally immersed and engaged in this process for 2 years, as if he were still coaching, and he really wanted it to be something special, and he was very, very pleased when it came out. I had never written a book before or written anything before where I tried to capture someone else's voice, tried to write it in their voice. And so Jim has a very unique way of talking. Now, there always were a lot of jokes about it being very hard to understand him. I never had a problem understanding Jim Calhoun. His accent didn't throw me, the speed with which he spoke didn't throw me. He does have a way of kind of rambling off on tangents, and that's where you have to kind of rein him in and edit those things out. And but like anyone, he has his distinct way of speaking, and I tried to capture that voice in this. And at one point, his wife Pat, who was really his true north, and I kind of became my true north on this project. When she would read a chapter and say, "This sounds like you, Jim," then I knew I had gotten that right and checked that box.
Now, how long did it take you to write the book?
It took a good 2 years to write it, simply because, partly because I do have a full-time job at the Kern, and my responsibilities there, I wasn't really able to, I would say if I could just devote myself strictly to this book, probably could have finished it in about 6 months. It goes pretty fast. A lot of publishers like working with newspaper writers because we know deadlines.
It's quick.
And we write quick. But this book, again, you had to try to get people, because we wanted to talk to each of the players that he talked about and get their stories and their sides of things. So it took a little while to hook up with every one of these guys. But overall, it took a good 2 years to finally get it finished and get to the product that we have now. And I think we have a really good, easy read, quick read. It's something I think people are going to enjoy. If you're a UConn fan, I think it's obviously it's a must read. If you're a college basketball fan, it's a must read. And if you're a fan of relationships, of coaching, of how coaches build relationships, I think you really, really enjoy it, because that's really what it's about and not really just about basketball.
Now, who were some of the players that he reconnected with for the book?
He didn't reconnect because he's connected with everybody all the time. And I spent a lot of time with him in his office at St. Joseph's now in West Hartford.
In West Hartford.
And his office is like Grand Central Station. The phone's ringing constantly. And it's Emeka Okafor, or it's Steve Peichel, or it's Kemba Walker, or it's Caron Butler. He's in touch with these players all the time. And but we wanted to pick, one thing we didn't want to do is we wanted to be very careful not to write the same story 10 different times. We wanted to make sure that each of the stories was a little unique and different from the others. And so we tried to pick players that he felt he had the most impact on. There were some players that we didn't pick because he just felt like they didn't necessarily need him the way others did. We did do one chapter on Rip Hamilton where he felt that it was a learning experience for Jim, because Rip didn't need a father figure, he needed a coach. And so he had to figure out, it's all about figuring out what these players needed and how to give it to them. But some of the ones, we tried to get a mix of the famous names that you'd want, should be in there, like Ray Allen, Rip Hamilton, Kemba Walker, Ben Gordon. We also tried to get some people that he coached at Dedham High School as a very young coach, and high school kids, one of whom went on to become a big, high-level NASA manager. We also talked with people that he coached at St. Joe's, one who wanted to become a dentist, and Jim helped him become a dentist. And,
oh, wow.
And we talked to some people at Northeastern as well. So we tried to cover the whole gamut of his life, not just UConn, but this culture of caring, this culture of relationships between coaches and players is what he felt he built UConn on.
Right.
And that's what he feels has been continued by his successors, the relationships. And even to this day with Dan Hurley, who wrote the foreword to this book, it's not, UConn is not really transactional. The relationships are real between coaches and players.
Right. And what's Dan Hurley like as a coach?
Well, if I said he was a young Jim Calhoun, Jim would probably cringe a little bit. He's like Jim in many ways. Both had backgrounds as high school teachers.
Okay.
Dan was a teacher, so I believe he was a history teacher at St. Benedict's in Newark.
Oh, okay.
Jim was a social studies teacher at Old Lyme High School and then Westport and Dedham High in Massachusetts. So they kind of bring that high school teacher's mentality, that classroom mentality, to coaching.
Okay.
And they're both very people-oriented. Jim was hyper-intense during games, particularly in coaching his players. Dan tends to be more of a cheerleader of his players during games, and vents on the officials during games.
Yes, I've seen that.
Yeah. But they have a lot of similarities, but of course Dan coaches in a different era with the NIL, with the revenue sharing now, and also the social media era and the internet era. Jim didn't have to worry quite as much about those things.
Right.
So in a lot of ways, I don't know if I would say that Dan is a younger Jim, but I think he's an updated form of Jim. If Jim were coaching today, he would probably be a lot like Dan. And if Dan were coaching in the 1980s, he probably would have been a lot more like Jim.
Really? Wow. And then there's the wonderful women's basketball program that we have at UConn.
Yeah.
What's Gino like?
It's pretty much what you see on TV. He's got a great gift of gab.
Okay.
He manages to get his players to play hard even when they know they're supposed to win by 50 and they're winning by 50.
Yes.
They never relent, never let up. And he's able to do that in a way that I don't think anyone else in any sport is able to do. There's never any complacency that you see with that program, even though they have every reason to be complacent.
Right.
So he really gets the most out of them and gets them ready for the March tournament.
Right.
Even if they're not tested all that much between now and March. But he's again, like Jim and like Dan, he's an avid reader.
Okay.
An avid reader of other coaches' books.
Right.
And a real student of human nature and human relationships. And that's ultimately the secret behind his success. And I think it's true of most great coaches. There are very few great coaches in any sport who are simply impersonal X's and O's technicians of their sport. If they have that in combination with the psychology, then you have a real winner. But every great coach, certainly that I've been around, Joe Torre and Dan Reeves and Tom Coughlin and people like that, and of course all the UConn coaches, they all have that combination of being psychologists first and people managers first, and then technicians of their sport second.
Would you mind sticking around for another segment?
Absolutely.
All right, we'll be right back.
Better Business Bureau is warning residents about Eastern Transportation and Rentals, a Coventry-based company accused of taking money for airport rides and never showing up. 24 travelers say they prepaid for rides to Boston Logan and JFK airports through owner Mitch Cloder, but were left stranded and out hundreds of dollars. Some say they were promised refunds that never came. The Connecticut Department of Transportation confirms the company does not have a valid livery permit or business license. Police in multiple towns have issued arrest warrants for Cloder. Now, if you need a ride service, always check a company's reputation at bbb.org. Ask to see their permit and insurance and avoid paying through peer-to-peer apps. Use a credit card instead. It offers more protection if something goes wrong. Don't let travel plans turn into trouble. Report scams anytime at bbb.org/scamtracker.
Welcome back to this week's edition of the Pete Mezzetti Show. I'm Pete Mezzetti, sitting here with Amore from the Hartford Courant and co-publisher of the book. Welcome back.
Nice to be back.
Thanks for sticking around. So in the first segment, we talked about a vast variety of things. What do you want to open the segment talking about?
Well, I like to talk about, again, some of the stories in the book
Sure.
that I think people are really going to enjoy. It starts right out with Dan Hurley's foreword in the book that, Dan's first couple of days on the job at UConn, he was frustrated with what he found and what the state of things and all the work that he had to do to fix it. And he walked down the hall to where Coach still had an office there and kind of commiserate with him, thinking he'd find a sympathetic ear. And instead, Jim just lit him up and said, grow up and go talk to the athletic director and tell him what you need. He said, you were brought here because this needed to be fixed. Now fix it. And so, as Dan kind of learned right there, that the tough love was the secret behind Jim and the engine behind UConn.
Okay.
And then the afterword was written by another championship coach, Mark Daignault of the Oklahoma City Thunder, the NBA. Mark was a student manager for Jim at UConn as a freshman in 2000, I believe, or late 90s. And like most student managers, he never played college basketball. He played in high school, became a student manager. And Jim, as with many student managers, didn't appear to pay attention to him the first year. Now, he was watching him and seeing, but he wasn't calling him by name or talking to him very much. But over the course of the year, Jim kind of figured, I could trust this kid. He knows what he's doing. He's competent. He's reliable. He's here. He's dependable. Just the way a high school teacher or an employer might do with any young new employee.
Right.
So on the last day of the regular season, UConn was going to Madison Square Garden, and Jim walked over and said, "Hey, Mark," and he gave him the keys to his expensive car. I guess it was an Explorer, and said, "I want you to follow the bus, drive to Manhattan, park in the garage across from the garden, and don't screw it up." So, Mark, who had never driven in New York before, he was from a rural area in Massachusetts. He's white-knuckle driving, trying to follow this bus driver who was a maniac down the West Side Highway through Manhattan. But finally, he gets it into the garage, and he said he never felt more relief and more empowered than when he could put the keys back in Jim's hands and say, "Yeah, there's not a mark on the car."
There you go.
And he just mentioned that was what Jim did for people. He empowered you, he scared you, but he challenged you to do things that get out of your comfort zone and do things that you didn't know you could do or didn't think you could do or never thought you'd ever have to do. And along the way, and another familiar theme in the book too, as Mark got into coaching, Jim helped him get a job at Holy Cross, his first job, and he moved up the ladder. Now, to go from a student manager who never played to coaching an NBA team is quite a remarkable journey.
Absolutely.
And yet, when Mark got the job at Oklahoma City, and he called Jim, and of course Jim was like, I knew you were going to get the job. That was kind of another. That's a common theme in the book with the gentleman, John Kowalowski from Dedham High, who ended up at NASA, went to MIT, with the young man at St. Joe's, Sam Majek, who became a dentist. Jim had this way of telling people, well, if that's what you want to do, that's what you're going to do. You're going to do it. We're going to figure out how to do it. We're going to get you there, and you're going to do it. And so Mark wanted to get into coaching. Jim helped him get into coaching, helped give him the tools to succeed in coaching. And, last year he won the NBA championship. And,
That's right.
And he called Jim and said, I wanted to call everyone who made a difference in my life. And you were right on the top of the list. So
wow.
Those are just great. Those are some of the stories that really appeal to Jim and appeal to me. There's some very poignant moments with someone who was also a student manager, Joe McGinn, who had a very serious illness and passed away just before that first championship. But there's a chapter on Jim's relationship with him and his family and how much they meant to each other. And similarly, there's some poignant moments in the chapter about Ben Gordon and the many struggles that he's had with his getting control of his mental health. And Jim kind of being there with him and being there by his side whenever Ben needed it. So there are a number of stories like that, and other stories are just kind of a celebration, for instance, of who Kemba Walker is and what he was and what he did at UConn and what he meant and where he's headed, and what Jim always calls the all-American success story, which is Caron Butler, coming from the streets, from reform school in Racine, Wisconsin, to from working at Burger King to owning a bunch of Burger Kings himself.
Really?
As well as, of course, being an all-star NBA player, and now a coach and an activist for coach with the Miami Heat and an activist for voting rights and other things. Jim's very, very proud of Caron and everything that he's done. And so, and of course, the guys like Ray Allen, who referred to Jim as an acquired taste. And,
really?
And just how their relationship evolved and continues to this day. So, we just both of us really enjoyed this journey of talking to all of these players. And I would talk to Jim for a couple of hours about a player. Then I would talk to the player for as long as I could to maybe get some stories that Jim didn't tell, or maybe get a little different version of the story that Jim told.
Right.
Then I would go back to Jim and say, hey, do you remember this or do you remember that? And then from all of that, each chapter would kind of form and emerge. And it was really a fun process to be a part of. And it was a great experience for me to, again, get out of my comfort zone and do something that I hadn't done before and maybe never realized I would ever try to do.
Now, would you try to do it again, or?
I would.
Yeah.
I'm getting to the age where I'll be retiring from my full-time job, and I would like to maybe get into writing books more frequently and having more time to spend on them. I know Jim has already talked about doing a sequel. I don't know if he's kidding or not, but. There've always been a lot of books there were a lot of books I wanted to do when I was covering the Yankees, but I just did not have the time, covering 162 games a year.
No.
But I wish I could go back and maybe revisit some of those people that I met there and write one of their books. But and of course I'm a baseball guy at heart, so I always enjoy. My first book was a baseball history book on the first 20 years of the Yankees, the early Yankee history. So I do like. I would like to write more books, to answer your question, yes. And,
okay.
And now that I know that I can do a book in someone else's voice, I would tackle it again.
Now, what was it like hanging out at Madison Square Garden watching a college basketball game? It has to be pretty cool. I've never been to the Garden.
Well, you should go.
Yeah?
I would tell you to go.
All right.
Get tickets for the Big East tournament. And go down for the day when they have the four games.
And I'm sure you're there.
I hopefully there, God willing, I will be there. But it's a very different. It's one of those places like the New York venues tend to be like this, but the Garden in particular, I think Mike Lupica used to call it the Garden Monster. There's a certain sound that the crowd has in there that's steady. It's like a steady roar. Now, when it erupts, then it's like the roof's going to blow off.
Right.
But it's like a steady roar, regardless of what's happening in the game or what the score is or what, the default level of decibel is very high at the Garden.
Yeah.
And it's unlike any other place. I always imagine in my mind that steady roar that's just a little bit louder than the steady roar at other places. So it's a very unique place to cover a game and watch a game. And I wish we had the floor seats that we used to have. We're up a little bit, raised a little bit.
Oh yeah.
But it's still, if it's UConn St. John's or if it's UConn against, another like a Providence or a Villanova
Yeah.
or Seton Hall, where it's a packed house and it's 50-50. There are very few places that rival it as far as electric. You hear the word electric a lot. It's kind of a
Yes.
cliche, but the Garden is one place that's legitimately electric.
Absolutely. And I'm sure seeing a game up at Mohegan Sun is cool too, because that's a pretty cool venue. I've been by it, but I've never been inside.
Well, there again, go to a WNBA game. I'd recommend it next year. You may not have many more chances to do that.
No, that's
So
right.
I would
That's
take
right.
in a game there next year, and take in a game when one of the marquee players in the league is playing, and it'll be an experience that you'll take with you.
Like Paige Beckers might show up.
Yeah, you might want to do that, and Gamble Pavilion is a place you want to go see a game, either team, when it's a big marquee game. That's a very special
Like
place
UConn plays
too.
Providence or UConn plays Seton
Yeah,
Hall.
for sure. Yeah, UConn St. John's. I think UConn Arizona a couple of weeks ago was pretty special in there. I one of the first games I covered in there when I moved over from baseball was the night Shabazz Napier hit the buzzer beater against Florida
Really?
in 2013, and boy, I feared for my health and my life after that game because they were storming the court, jumping over me, but also just the volume. When you're down on the floor,
Right.
it's like being on the floor of the Grand Canyon. If you're down there, you really, really hear noise.
Everything.
Now the press sits up in the rafters, and it almost sounds like it's distant. You don't get the full feel that you did when you were down on the floor. Yeah.
Now, is Mike Lupica still writing these days?
Yeah, he's still around.
Is he right?
Still with the Daily News.
Okay.
Yep. Yep. I know Mike, and I know he's determined to have a column in the last edition of the Daily News. He's going to be there as long as that ship is afloat.
What's he like? I remember Mike when he used to work for Ibis.
Brilliant writer,
Yeah.
brilliant thinker, very passionate about what he's doing, and very, very, obviously very, very strong in his opinions, which is something, I sometimes tend to be a little analytical.
Right.
I can be kind of, as a columnist, I can be kind of an Adlai Stevenson in the world of Joe McCarthy's, but, Mike is very thoughtful and very strong in his opinions.
And I'm sure.
I got to be careful about dropping names here because you're gonna.
I know, and I'm sure the sports world has changed over the years as well.
It really has in a lot of ways, and the thing that's obviously changed it the most, Peter, is social media.
Yeah.
And the internet. It used to be possible to, really work a clubhouse or work a locker room and develop your own story and get your own unique angle on a story. But today, everything, the teams feel like they don't need conventional media. They can tell their own stories on their own platforms.
Right.
And our access has just dwindled through the years. And then the pandemic really, now access was almost nothing. And we never really got back to pre-pandemic levels of access. So much of it is by Zoom.
Right.
And, young reporters getting in the business today, many of them have never been in a locker room.
No.
Many of them don't realize that you can talk to somebody outside of the structured availability and develop your own unique story and write it.
Right.
We're fortunate at the Current. We have two wonderful young reporters, Joe Arruda and Emily Adams. I love working with them, and they really get it. They really understand the difference between writing for a newspaper like ours and maybe blogging or tweeting or writing or doing a podcast. They really get that difference and do a great job. But it's harder and harder to find young people with that mindset that it takes to be successful in a traditional or conventional journalism platform.
And I'm sure over the years you've seen the world of sports writing change from print newspapers to online.
Yeah, when I started in New Haven, it was a 2-newspaper city. They were same owners though. And so when I covered a game, I would have to write a story for the morning paper immediately. And then I could just sit back and write a more analytical, lengthy feature type story for the afternoon paper.
Right.
So you'd have a morning approach and an afternoon approach. So when the internet came in, I just kind of slid that forward. And my first flash story for the internet is like what the morning paper used to be.
Yeah.
And then my story for the paper is more like what my afternoon story used to be.
Gotcha.
So that's how I've kind of adjusted to it. But there is the deadline is like now. You don't have an 8 o'clock deadline. The deadline is right now. You got to get it in right now.
Exactly.
Everything's got to be right now. So there's always that pressure to throw things out there and be first. The pressure to be first today is greater than the pressure to be right. Whereas in the old days, there was more balance between those two things. And I, for better or worse, I try to stick to that pressure to be first, but also pressure to be right and do the right thing. I try to keep that balance between those two and not let it get too much, hey, be first and don't, and then figure it out. Try not to be shoot first and figure out the details later.
Exactly. I remember back in the day I was involved with Morgan football and Morgan lacrosse, and I was the guy running up and down the sidelines, tweeting scores, calling in. And I remember at the end of the game, physically calling in a score to the newspaper. Mm-hmm. It's like,
yep.
Wow, times
well, now at least
have changed.
Now at least you can email it. But,
exactly.
But again, newspapers now follow those things by following Twitter.
Right.
And then they know who won because somebody's tweeting, like you would be tweeting play-by-play. And
exactly.
as soon as you tweeted the final score, they would have it.
Exactly. And then it would get uploaded to the guys from, is it Game Time?
Yeah, Game Time Connecticut, which is Hearst, yeah. Yeah, Sean very much ahead of the curve, Sean Patrick Bowley.
Yeah.
Very much ahead of the curve in the coverage of high school sports in Connecticut. And his operation has survived all of the seismic changes that have come.
Well, another one that's changed with the times to come in with high school sports, and I'm sure you know this person as well as I do, George DeMeo.
Yeah.
Great guy.
Yep. Again, a guy that...
He's an interesting guy.
Interesting guy, and a guy who has done things the way he feels they should be done and made that and sustained it, which he's never caved in to every new idea. He stays true to the way he's done things, which has worked for him for a long time and still works.
Yeah, absolutely. So what other stories can we tell from the book?
Well, one of the things that Jim is really wanted to write a chapter about his family and how important family is to him.
Right.
So as I mentioned, how he had to become the head of the family and take care of his mother, take care of his 5 sisters, take care of his younger brother as they grew up. He was very adamant about including something that his sons had written about him, and it was amazing. we ran a paper that his older son wrote as an 8th grader in prep school. And we ran something that his younger son, Jeff, wrote just now.
Okay.
And independently of each other, they both finished with the same line that my father is my best friend. And that brought tears to Jim's eyes when he read through that and saw that. I think rather than any anecdote specifically, I think the way Jim feels about family and his family and the importance of family in his life, I think really comes through in this book.
Now, are you guys out meeting the public and doing book tours?
We are, and that's been great to see. We went to, before the first men's basketball game, we did a signing at the Yukon bookstore across the street from Gamble Pavilion.
Okay.
And they were lined up for 2 hours, and 160, 180 people came by, and it was so great to see so many people just wanted to shake Jim's hand and say thank you for what he did for not just for Yukon, but for the state of Connecticut and the quality of life in Connecticut, with what he brought to Yukon men's basketball and where he brought Yukon men's basketball as really a big league franchise for Connecticut. And that really kind of invigorates him and rejuvenates him to talk to people and sign for them and get their stories and give them his stories and take a picture. He's been wonderful with people. And we did a book signing there. We did a book signing in Darien. We did a book signing in New Jersey that had just dozens of people in Yukon sweatshirts and Yukon gear and came by, and it was the same thing. He loves to tell stories, and he's invigorated by dealing with people, and at 83 he really is remarkable. He's just a marvel at how sharp he is and how energetic he is and how and also, as I said, how competitive he is. I mean, he wants to sell books.
Right.
He wants to know, how's the book selling? Are people buying it? Should we do something else? Should we do something more? So he really is a marvel. And the thing that I really learned from working with him for 2 years, some people are survivors, but Jim's not a survivor. He's a liver and a thriver.
Right.
He wants to live and live to the fullest every second that he has.
Gotcha.
He wants to be helping somebody, making a difference, looking for some way to make a difference, contributing something every minute of every day that he has on this earth. And that's the most important thing to him. And it's an incredible lesson for me to see, and for other people to see too, that you got to get out of bed every morning and attack life.
Right.
And he always says, win the day. Get out every morning and attack life every morning that you have, because you don't know how many you're going to have.
Exactly.
But when you got them, use them to the fullest.
Absolutely.
And that's the way he lives his life. And it's really it was a tremendous example and education for me at age 63 to see that in someone who's 20 years older than me. And I hope it's a great lesson and a great inspiration for people younger, not to waste this precious gift of life that we all have.
Absolutely. Now, do you think he still watches college basketball?
Oh, yeah. Still watches.
Okay.
By the way, still as absolutely sharp as you could possibly be.
Oh, yeah?
He would call me up in the summer and tell me that he just went to Yukon practice and he saw this and saw that. And he's unerring in telling you who he thinks is going to have a good year, who he thinks is really going to help, who he thinks might not fit in or might not really work out, not only with Yukon but with other teams as well.
Really?
I don't want to give away too much out of school.
No.
But there's one team this year that came into the season with very high expectations, and Jim told me just from watching a few minutes of one of their exhibition games.
Yep.
That they're going to struggle this year. They're not as good as people think they are. They're lacking in this. They're lacking in that. And you know what? They've lost 3 games.
Really?
Yeah. But I'll give you one. Cam Spencer. He told me that summer.
Okay.
Boy, this guy can play. This guy can help. And he told me he could play in the NBA. which nobody thought was possible, but he
No.
knew that. So his eye for talent, his ability to assess talent, is as sharp as anybody who's in the game today. He knows what he's saying, and when he tells you something, you could take it to the bank about a player. You know, I mean, if I were a gambling man, I'd get down some prop bets on some of the things that,
Yeah, right.
or some fantasy,
Yeah, exactly.
fantasy drafts
So get
on
some
what he does.
fantasy drafts out. We've got a little bit more time left, so what else we want to talk about?
Well, first of all, make sure people know how they can
Yeah, I was going
get
to say.
the book.
I was
It's
gonna
called
say.
More Than a Game: How the Yukon Dynasty Was Built on a Culture of Caring. It's available wherever fine books are sold, but we're actually having trouble getting enough printed to meet the demand.
Oh, no.
But Amazon has it, and
Okay.
Barnes & Noble has it, and most Barnes & Noble stores in Connecticut have it or will be getting it.
Okay.
RJ Julia has it, Middletown and Madison.
Yep.
They've got it. I know we've also been down to Darien, the bookstore there has it. So it's available wherever fine books are sold. There's a paperback version coming out next spring, so
Okay.
that'll be out as well.
So another book tour?
Yeah, we'll get Jim out to do some more, or he'll get me out because he'll
Yeah, right.
kind of drags me by the collar to do all these things. But no, it's so Jim is incredibly excited about this and really proud of it, and everyone who's read it seems to really like it. It's gotten really, really good reviews everywhere, and as I said, when you see Amazon gets it in stock, it runs out quick. So I'm hoping they get some soon, so you're not buying it on eBay for $100.
Exactly, and I'm sure you've read it a couple times.
Oh yeah, well, we've gone through it with a fine tooth. It's a very hard process. The one thing about editing a book, or about reading a book, or writing a book,
Yeah.
is your eyes are never going to see the mistakes because you don't read what's on the page or the
No.
screen. You read what you think you said or what you meant to say.
Right.
So the more pairs of eyes you get on the book, the better. And the people at Woodhall Press here in Connecticut-based publisher, they're authors themselves, and they've obviously done a lot of books from college professors like Gina Barreca, and they just did a fabulous job with the design, with the editing of the book, with the whole presentation of it. As you can see, it's a very very good-looking cover. People
It
see
is.
this, they pick it up. So.
It is.
So yeah, I want to make sure people know where to get the book, and be sure to go out. Great stocking stuffer for the
That's right, the
Yukon
upcoming
fan in your life.
The upcoming holiday
and
season.
yeah, and if you don't get one for Christmas, pick one up for Father's Day.
Absolutely. We've got about a minute and a half left, so final thoughts?
Final thoughts is that I think anybody who is a young coach, and one of the fun things I've had an opportunity to do, Brady Sheffield over at Old Lyme took over the job at age 21,
Okay.
and he won a state championship, Old Lyme's first.
Right.
And Jim coached at Old Lyme in 1969.
Right.
His first job and he was 1-17. Then he went to Massachusetts, and I remember calling him up and saying, "Hey Jim, Old Lyme won the state championship yesterday." I said, "That 55-year rebuilding program you started finally came to fruition." But I put Jim on the phone with Brady Sheffield, and they talked about Old Lyme, and that obviously Brady, Coach Sheffield, was thrilled at that. But no, Jim is just so involved and so engaged in life, and that's what I hope people get out of this book, is that the importance of being engaged, the importance of being there, being present for the people in your life. That's what he was all about, and that's what this is all about, and that's what this book is all about.
Don Moore from the Hartford Courant. Thanks for
Peter,
some time. We'll see you soon.
Thank you. Great to be here. Thank you very much.
You got, on behalf of Don Moore, I'm Pete Mezzetti. Thanks. Good night. We'll see you next time.
All right.
The preceding program was brought to you in part by